Ladies and gentlemen, the shadow is often spoken of as the dark side of human nature, the place where our fears, flaws, and unwanted desires are stored. Yet to reduce it only to something negative is to misunderstand its true role in our lives. The shadow is not simply a container for weakness, but a hidden reservoir of energy and possibility. It is the part of us that we do not show to the world, and sometimes do not even admit to ourselves, but it is also the part that carries a deep and transformative power. From the earliest years of life, we learn which aspects of ourselves are acceptable to others and which are not. A child who shows too much anger may be told to stay quiet. A child who is overly sensitive may be told to toughen up. A child who longs for attention may be shamed for being selfish. Slowly, these natural instincts and emotions are pushed out of sight, banished into the unconscious. We build an image of ourselves that fits the expectations of family, society, or culture, but the pieces that do not match are not gone. They are simply hidden. Over time, those hidden pieces form what we call the shadow. The tragedy is that what we exile into the shadow is not only destructive tendencies, but also vital qualities of strength. The anger that was silenced could have become the fire of determination. The sensitivity that was mocked could have grown into profound empathy. The selfishness that was shamed could have developed into healthy self-respect. When we push these aspects away, they do not vanish. They wait for us in the dark, waiting for the moment we have the courage to face them again. The shadow expresses itself in many ways when left unacknowledged. It appears in our judgments of others, when we condemn in them the very qualities we secretly repress in ourselves. It appears in sudden outbursts, when emotions long buried erupt without warning. It appears in the patterns we repeat in relationships, drawn again and again to situations that mirror the parts of ourselves we try to avoid. This is why many people feel as though life is driven by forces outside of their control. What they do not realize is that much of that force is their own unclaimed shadow guiding them from beneath the surface. But when the shadow is faced consciously, everything changes. What once seemed like a curse becomes a gift. The individual who has always feared their anger may learn to channel it into fierce protection of those they love or into the courage to stand against injustice. The one who has hidden their fear may discover that it sharpens their awareness and grants them humility that others lack. Even envy, which so often poisons the heart, can become a guiding light when understood. It shows us what we desire, what we are capable of, and what paths are waiting to be claimed. The shadow is powerful because it holds the energy of what has been denied. The more forcefully we repress something, the stronger it grows in the unconscious. This is why meeting the shadow can feel overwhelming at first. It is as if the emotions and instincts hidden for years surge forward with the intensity of a flood. But within that flood is raw vitality. It is the fuel that, once integrated, gives rise to authenticity, creativity, and resilience. The very qualities that once threatened to undo us become the foundation of our greatest strength. Consider the artist who once hid their sensitivity for fear of being wounded. When they embrace it, that same sensitivity becomes the source of deep creativity, giving them the ability to see and express truths that others overlook. Or the leader who once repressed their doubts in order to appear confident. By acknowledging those doubts, they develop humility and wisdom, making them stronger and more trustworthy than blind arrogance ever could. Again and again, the shadow reveals itself not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as an ally waiting to be discovered. The journey of facing the shadow is not an easy one. It requires honesty, patience, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths about oneself. Yet the reward is immense, for in that darkness lies not only the aspects of ourselves we feared, but also the very essence of what makes us whole. The shadow is the hidden face of our strength, a mirror showing us what we could become if only we are brave enough to claim it. When people think of their darker impulses, their hidden fears, or the emotions they would rather not reveal, the instinct is almost always to push them away. We grow up learning that certain parts of ourselves are unacceptable, that showing anger makes us dangerous, that expressing sadness makes us weak, that admitting jealousy makes us petty. So we learn to suppress, to bury, to deny. We polish the image of who we believe we must be, while behind the mask, the disowned parts of ourselves are forced into silence. What many fail to see is that this very act of denial does not weaken the shadow, but strengthens it. Every time we refuse to face what lives within us, we give it more power over us. Denial is not destruction, it is containment. Imagine locking something away in a dark room and throwing away the key. It may be out of sight, but it is not gone. It grows in the dark, feeding on our fear, shaping our reactions, and finding its way into our lives in disguised forms. The more we pretend it is not there, the more it controls us. What we do not face inwardly will eventually confront us outwardly, appearing in the way we treat others, in the choices we make, and in the crises that repeat themselves in our lives. The shadow thrives on denial. When you suppress anger, it does not vanish, it hardens, waiting for the smallest crack to erupt, often at the worst possible time. When you bury fear, it grows into anxiety that colors every decision, making you cautious even when courage is needed. When you deny envy, it seeps into resentment, poisoning relationships and blinding you to your own path. Each act of denial is like pouring water on a seed. The seed of the shadow does not wither, it roots itself deeper, expanding silently until its presence can no longer be ignored. This is why people often find themselves repeating the same destructive patterns. They wonder why they keep choosing the same kind of partner, why they keep sabotaging opportunities, why they keep falling into cycles of regret. They think it is bad luck or fate, when in truth it is the unacknowledged shadow at work. By refusing to see it, they are led by it. Denial gives it the power to steer from behind the curtain. What is unexamined directs us more than what is conscious, because the unconscious never rests. It operates without our awareness, shaping thought, behavior, and even desire. To understand how denial strengthens the shadow, one must see how energy works in the psyche. Every impulse, every emotion, every thought carries energy. When we accept and integrate it, we direct that energy consciously. But when we deny it, the energy does not disappear, it becomes distorted. Anger denied turns into bitterness, fear denied becomes paralysis, desire denied grows into obsession. The more we run from it, the stronger its grip becomes, because the shadow feeds on the attention it is denied. It is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It requires effort, but sooner or later it will burst to the surface with force. Even society reflects this truth. Cultures that demand perfection and deny human flaws often create environments where those very flaws erupt in exaggerated and destructive forms. A community that insists on purity produces hidden corruption. A family that forbids open conflict breeds quiet resentment and unspoken hostility. The rule is the same at every level. What is denied gains power in silence. The painful irony is that by denying the shadow, we become less free. We imagine we are protecting ourselves from pain or shame, but in reality, we are binding ourselves to it. We live cautiously, afraid that someone might see through the mask. We judge others harshly, not realizing we are condemning in them what we cannot accept in ourselves. We project onto the world the very qualities we bury inside, making enemies of our own reflection. The more we deny, the more fragmented we become, until our lives feel divided between the person we present and the person we secretly are. And yet, within this struggle lies a hidden opportunity. The intensity of the shadow's power is proof of its energy. If denial strengthens it, then acknowledgement begins to disarm it. The very forces that seemed destructive become sources of strength once they are brought into awareness. But as long as denial persists, the shadow rules. Its strength is born from secrecy, and secrecy is maintained by fear. To face the shadow is to begin loosening its grip, but to deny it is to hand it control. Human beings are often taught to divide emotions into two categories, those that are acceptable and those that are unacceptable. Joy, love, and hope are celebrated, while anger, fear, jealousy, and grief are pushed aside as if they were flaws to be eradicated. This division may seem natural, but it blinds us to the deeper truth of the psyche, that every emotion, no matter how dark it appears, carries within it a seed of transformation. What we call dark emotions are not simply destructive forces. They are messengers, bearing energy and wisdom that can be reshaped into strength, clarity, and growth. Take anger, for instance. At first glance, it appears dangerous, something that tears apart relationships and burns bridges. But anger, in its rawest form, is a signal that something is unjust, that a boundary has been crossed, or that dignity has been violated. When left unconscious, it erupts in violence or resentment, yet when acknowledged and understood, it transforms into courage and determination. The same energy that once fueled destructive outbursts can become the fire that defends the vulnerable, that stands against oppression, that asserts what is fair and right. Anger, when met with awareness, reveals itself not as chaos, but as the fierce guardian of justice. Fear is another emotion that so many strive to suppress. It is seen as weakness, as a sign of failure, as something to be ashamed of. Yet fear is deeply tied to survival. It sharpens the senses, keeps us alert, and forces us to prepare. A person who has learned to listen to fear, rather than be paralyzed by it, finds that it carries within it an intelligence. It points toward danger, but also toward growth, because fear often arises where something new and meaningful is at stake. Transforming fear does not mean erasing it, but reshaping it into vigilance, humility, and courage. Fear becomes the companion that whispers, "This matters," and in that whisper lies the call to rise. Then there is envy, an emotion that corrodes silently when denied. It is uncomfortable to admit, for it reveals a longing we would rather hide. Envy is often projected outward as criticism of others, but in truth it carries a hidden map. It shows us what we desire but have not yet claimed for ourselves. When envy is faced honestly, it no longer poisons but inspires. It transforms into motivation, urging us to pursue our own path with greater clarity. Instead of resenting the light of another, we begin to kindle our own flame, guided by the recognition of what truly calls us. Grief, too, is often misunderstood. It is associated with loss, emptiness, and despair, and many try to rush through it or avoid it altogether. But grief is the shadow of love. We grieve because we have loved deeply, and that love does not vanish with loss, it transforms. In grief, we learn the depth of our capacity to feel, and with time, the pain becomes a well of compassion. Those who have walked through grief often emerge with a tenderness toward life, a greater ability to connect with others, and a recognition of what truly matters. Grief transforms suffering into wisdom, teaching us that impermanence does not diminish love, but magnifies its value. The common thread among these emotions is that they contain energy, and energy is never destroyed. It only changes form. When denied, dark emotions take twisted shapes and control us from the shadows. But when embraced and integrated, they release their hidden gifts. What appears destructive becomes constructive, what appears heavy becomes grounding, and what appears threatening becomes a source of renewal. The key is not to eliminate these emotions, but to enter into dialogue with them, to listen to their messages, and to redirect their force with awareness. The transformation of dark emotions is not about becoming someone who never feels anger, fear, envy, or grief. It is about becoming someone who no longer fears them, someone who can take the raw material of human experience and shape it into something meaningful. In this process, we discover that the very emotions we once judged as weaknesses are, in truth, the guardians of our strength. They are not obstacles to our growth, but the pathways through which we become whole. Freedom is a word that is spoken often, yet its true meaning is rarely understood. Many believe freedom lies in escaping responsibility, in doing whatever one pleases without restraint, in cutting ties with anything that feels heavy or demanding. But such freedom is fleeting, because it is built upon avoidance rather than truth. Real freedom is not about running away from life. It is about facing it fully. It does not arise from denying the weight of who we are, but from embracing it. The path to freedom is the path inward, the path of self, knowledge, and the path of reconciliation with all that has been hidden within us. The first step on this path is recognizing that much of what binds us is invisible. Chains do not always appear as rules, walls, or laws. They often take the shape of beliefs we did not choose, patterns we repeat unconsciously, fears we inherited, and desires we dare not admit. A person may believe they are free because no one controls them outwardly, yet remain imprisoned by self, doubt, by shame, by the need for approval, or by the endless pursuit of what others expect. These inner prisons are the most powerful because they operate silently, convincing us that we are making choices when in truth we are only reacting to forces within us we have never confronted. To walk the path to freedom, one must dare to face the self with honesty. This means acknowledging the parts of us that we have rejected, the fear that whispers at night, the anger that erupts without reason, the grief we carry but refuse to name. These inner forces do not lose power through denial. They only grow stronger. By turning toward them, however, we begin to understand them, and in understanding them, we loosen their grip. Freedom begins where self-deception ends. This journey is not comfortable. It is far easier to wear masks, to cling to roles, to hide behind identities that win us approval. Yet the cost of comfort is authenticity, and without authenticity, there is no freedom. The person who hides their true self may avoid conflict, but they remain trapped in the prison of performance. The one who denies their own needs may appear noble, but they remain bound by resentment and fatigue. True freedom requires the courage to live as one really is, even if that truth does not please everyone. The path to freedom also requires the integration of opposites within us. Human beings are not only light or only dark, not only strong or only fragile. We are both. Wholeness is achieved when we stop choosing between one side of ourselves and the other, and instead hold them together. A person who accepts their fear alongside their courage, their anger alongside their compassion, their grief alongside their joy, becomes someone who can move through life without hiding. This is the essence of freedom, not perfection, but wholeness. Freedom is not given, it is claimed, and it is claimed not by conquering the world outside, but by reclaiming the world within. Each time we choose to be honest with ourselves, we break a chain. Each time we act from inner alignment rather than outer expectation, we step closer to liberation. Each time we face what we once fled, we recover a piece of ourselves, and with it, a piece of our freedom. Yet freedom is not an end point. It is a continual practice. The path requires vigilance, for it is easy to fall back into the familiar chains of denial and projection. But the more one walks this path, the lighter the steps become. Life ceases to feel like a burden that must be carried, and instead becomes a journey that can be embraced. Freedom does not mean the absence of struggle, but the presence of clarity and the strength to move through struggle without losing oneself. The path to freedom is therefore not found in escape, but in encounter. It is not about casting off parts of ourselves, but about reclaiming them. It is not about rejecting the weight of life, but about learning to carry it with dignity. In walking this path, we come to see that what once felt like chains were often only the shadows of our own resistance. And when resistance dissolves into acceptance, the doors of freedom open from within. Freedom is not a gift handed down to us, nor is it found in running from our shadows. It is claimed by those who dare to face themselves, who accept their truth, and who choose wholeness over masks. The path to freedom is the path of courage, honesty, and inner alignment. When you take that path, you discover that no chain can hold you because the key was always within you. May you find the strength to walk that path, and in doing so, may you discover the freedom you have been searching for all along.